Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. Up first, had some pretty strong winds up over the, across western part of the state. Winds gusting around 40 miles an hour across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta today. That increases as you head northward. With here the long mountains there, western Brooks Range area, 123 mile per hour wind gusts reported there, because that's kind of a mountainous area there, the long mountains. Lookout Ridge, which is farther to the east from this location, about the same latitude there in the Brooks Range, 103 mile an hour wind gusts. Otherwise, Cape Lisburne, 77 miles an hour, and Red Dog Dock down obviously at sea level, 66 miles per hour. And moving on to the hazardous weather graphics, we've got winter storm warning out for tonight into early tomorrow for St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. 2 to 4 inches more of snow, but the winds that are expected gusting over 35 to 55 miles an hour will reduce visibilities to less than a quarter mile at times there. And that same sort of pattern going on, less wind, but more snow here through the Kobuk Valley, Kotzebue Sound, Selawik Valley, with the heaviest amounts. Could see up to 8 inches falling tonight and into tomorrow here over the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. That's where the heaviest snow will fall. And then those winds will create visibilities there as well, less than a quarter mile at times. And up here, western Arctic coast, blizzard warning in effect until midnight tonight. And again, winds, whiteout conditions due to winds and blowing snow there, and nothing out for the central coast, and then a blizzard warning out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. This is out from midnight tonight until midnight tomorrow night, and that's for, again, blizzard conditions or winds, gusty winds and blowing snow less than a quarter mile to whiteout conditions at times. And here for the Yukon Delta, and the yellow shaded areas here, right on up across the Yukon Flats, up to Arctic Village there, southeastern Brooks Range. Winter weather advisories, and that's for snow and blowing snow, lesser amounts, lesser severe conditions, or conditions not as severe as in the warning areas, but at times you could see blowing snow along with snowfall, resulting in visibilities less than half a mile at times. And some areas could pick up another 2 to 5, maybe 6 inches of snow in areas like Indian Mountain today had about 3 to 5 inches falling. And also down Togiak, they had 3 to 5. That ended already. That ended at about noontime today. Otherwise, Fairbanks area, that's a winter weather advisory there for snow. And that actually kicks into effect from midnight tonight until midnight tomorrow night. And that's for anywhere from 3 to 7 inches of snow expected during that time frame, that 24-hour period. And winds gusting 35 miles an hour, so I'll drop those visibilities at times down to less than half a mile. And same sort of thing going on here in the eastern Alaska range. That's more of a wind advisory condition there for winds gusting possibly 40 to 60 miles an hour or so west of the Tok Cutoff. And continuing forward here, you can see southern Alaska, the Aleutians, Bering Sea, no watches, warnings, or advisories out. Same thing for the Panhandle, all the action up to the north. And moving to satellite imagery, you can see massive clouds here kind of shifting eastward in the south to north flow here. Whole pattern though shifting eastward. High pressure holding though over the northeast Pacific, and this all sliding over the top of that. And that brought some light precipitation here across southern Alaska, nothing really too significant with heavier amounts. As I mentioned, Togiak on the back edge of that, they picked up 3 to 5 inches of snow, had some rain today in King Salmon, and showery conditions diminishing if not ending, fog out over the Pribilofs, and then the snow in areas here up to the northwest interior areas. But the strong winds really the story, more of a wind producer than a precipitation producer here, with a low pressure area back to the west and a very tight gradient here across the northern Bering Sea, with Tin City seeing wind gusts to 60 miles per hour today and Teller had 62-mile-an-hour wind gusts and about 50 miles an hour at Gamble. Windy day at Nome, gusts around 40 miles an hour, and a 40-mile-an-hour wind gust pretty common across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta at Bethel, St. Mary's, and let's see, Hooper Bay, for example, all about 40 miles an hour for their wind gusts, as well as Macoriac. And lighter winds down here over the Aleutians with some pretty good sunshine breaking out. So a nice day there, Nikolsky, Unalaska, and Dutch Harbor. Into the western Alaska Peninsula, showers diminishing here across the Alaska Peninsula, northeast Bristol Bay. And then the snow and blowing snow here, those strong gusty winds here, St. Lawrence Island, right on up into the Brooks Range. Lee side, though, the mountains, not much, if any, precipitation occurring there with higher ceilings and high pressure ridging over the southeast coast here. That made for a pretty good day over the Panhandle with some sunshine, light winds, precipitation free, high center over the Northwest Territories, Western Canada, Northern British Columbia, linking up with the high here. So kind of escaping any type of active weather over the southeast coast, as well as I mentioned here, eastern Aleutians, few showers just kind of skirting the west central Aleutians there. And fog, visibility's down to under a mile at times, both St. Paul and St. George, really not much in the way of any snowfall activity there, although you're pretty prone to it with the southwest flow. It looks like a lot of moisture, at least a lot of clouds off to your southwest, so you may get clipped with some here tonight. And the forecast for tonight, though, really doesn't show much here. Kind of a dry flow, even though it's southwest flow here, but all the moisture up along the Arctic boundary here over the Chukchi Sea, back along the cold front, on down toward the western Aleutians. So a band of snow with that. Snow and blowing snow right on the edge of St. Lawrence Island there. Keep the strong gusty winds. Very windy, snow blowing snow here over the northwest interior, western Arctic coast, on down Kotzebue Sound, northwest coast, Seward Peninsula, especially on the north side, be the windiest, snowiest, lowest visibility area there. Then the wind flow kind of takes a turn to the east here over the top of this 1,039 millibar ridge south of Kodiak. Northwest flow, not too strong, but enough to keep it mostly clear and dry for Kodiak. South central Alaska could see some clearing, which could probably result in more low clouds and fog like we had today around Cook Inlet. Maybe less of that over the Kenai Peninsula. None for Seward, being offshore flow there. Western Prince William Sound passes Canal into Portage, pretty good. Otherwise, chance of snow, rain or snow showers, northeast Prince William Sound, snow showers, Copper River Basin, a little more extensive area of snow and breezier conditions here up over the eastern interior areas. And weak trough, very weak system here. Might try to push a shower, rain or snow shower into the northern coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, not much change. Maybe a few more clouds up to the north, and that really isn't too significant. Gone off the chart for tomorrow there. Just another sunny day, light wind southeast coast and southern Alaska here. Kenai Peninsula looking sunnier than the Susitna Valley, but still dry there for the Susitna-Matanuska Valley. Copper River Basin, most sunshine central and southern areas, right on down to Cordova, Yakutat, and then as you head north here, especially north of the mountains, snow increases, winds increase, and snow and blowing snow also increases there. And should see some of that on the Arctic coast. Again, the east side improving here on the west side, east side conditions coming down, and some snow and blowing snow. But the winds, gradient not as tight as today, so you're going to see less wind out here with in advance of this low center back to the west, and kind of a mixture of precipitation chances there in that southerly flow coming up the Alaska Peninsula over to the eastern Aleutians, but ADAC on out, dry conditions even for Shimia. And taking a look at Saturday, high pressure really building into the southeastern Bering Sea here, up to 1,043 millibars just south of St. George Island. That's going to direct all of this system up to the northeast there, right into the Russian Far East. Northerly winds, low center tracking eastward here, so that's going to pull colder temperatures. Cold, snowy conditions will come across all areas of south central Alaska during the daytime, especially in toward evening on Saturday, and colder with diminishing snow showers here over the western interior. A couple of impulses dropping southward with snow central interior, Tanana Valley, Denali Park, right on down to the Susitna Valley. Kind of a mixture of precipitation as this low tracks eastward, then of course behind it the snowfall levels will fall, and rain increasing along the central north coast of the Panhandle. Lows tonight down that way in the 20s to, 20s and 30s there, teens Copper River Basin, 20s South Central Alaska, lower 30s Kodiak Island, and 20s Central Interior, teens Brooks Range, lower 20s, not too bad, pretty mild up there on the Arctic coast, even teens on the west side. Highs tomorrow near or just under the freeze point there for the Arctic coast, 20s Brooks Range. But you can see mid to upper 30s, Central Interior, lower 40s there in the lower Yukon River Valley area, northern Kuskokwim Valley into Bristol Bay. 30s, lower to mid, South Central Alaska, followed by lows in the 20s, and a little colder, down closer to 0 for the Arctic coast, and then teens for your highs.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation here. IFR here to the north from the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula, along and south of the Brooks Range here, possibly in the northern Koyukuk, Kobuk Valleys. North side, though, eastern central North Slope and eastern Beaufort Sea Coast, VFR. Pretty good area, marginal VFR in the central interior. Some more IFR, Yukon Delta, across the Kuskokwim Delta here into Bristol Bay, and across Iliamna Lake and the western slopes of the western Alaska Range. VFR, South Central Alaska. Possible IFR up here around the Wrangles, and VFR, Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and the Panhandle. For the afternoon, good VFR here for the southeast coast the entire day, and VFR here, southern Alaska, south and east of the Alaska Range. Could be some marginal lingering there on the western slopes of the Alaska Range, maybe the north here, but may not be this bad. IFR here along the southwest coast, across Norton Sound, south side of the Seward Peninsula, Golovin, White Mountain, Nome, those areas. And looks like Savunga, IFR, Gamble, VFR, Pribilofs right on the edge of the IFR zone, and the Fox Islands, south side of the Alaska Peninsula. IFR, eastern Beaufort Sea Coast, looks IFR right along the coastline back to about Point Barrow. And in better conditions, breakout here over the west central Aleutians, IFR spreading in Shimmy and Attu, the next system. And that kind of slips up to the northeast here by Saturday morning. Good VFR, Central Aleutians, Adak and Atka. And right over the Pribilofs, starting the Saturday, first day of the weekend out in the VFR side for the Pribilofs. Lots of IFR here, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, up into the southwest interior. And actually north, all the way to the south side of the Brooks Range. Bare conditions here in the east and north. Just some areas of marginal VFR, really. Looks like the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. South of the mountain, Copper River Basin looks good, and the IFR off the coast there, Prince William Sound. And over toward Yakutat, lingering marginal VFR Saturday morning, but staying VFR for the Panhandle. And for Saturday afternoon, finally get some lower conditions moving into the southeast coast there. Marginal VFR, IFR almost to the north coast, definitely IFR for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, Matanuska Valley here, and up across Talkeetnas to the Denali Park area, western part of the Denali Highway, and then kind of tapering off. But the good portion of the interior looks pretty marginal, but improving here out toward the west coast, eastern Bering Strait, all the way down. Aleutians, really nice. VFR flying there, and got to get out west of Kiska before you get anything lower. And for passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR, both Anatuvik and Adigan, marginal VFR with lingering IFR on the southern approach of both passes. Lake Clark and Merrill, starting out marginal, I think will become VFR in the afternoon. And lowest conditions will be on the western entrance of both passes. Rainy, occasionally marginal throughout the day, and windy. Marginal VFR becoming VFR. And let's move to Isabel. I think it'll be a mostly marginal kind of day for that pass. And Mentasta, marginal VFR trending toward VFR. And for Tanita, same forecast, marginal VFR becoming VFR probably by late morning and through the afternoon. Portage, good VFR just like yesterday. And for Chilkoot and White, excuse me, VFR becoming marginal. And for the freezing levels here at the surface, right along the coast, and then 2,000 feet, 2,000 to 4,000 feet for the Panhandle, and over the Alaska Peninsula down the eastern Aleutians. And then at the surface, north of the Pribilofs, but just south of St. Matthew Island, icing A little bit of moderate or considerable rime icing possible eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula with this batch of moisture. And then up along the southern slopes of western Brooks Range could be a little heavier icing, but otherwise pretty light here in the shaded areas. No icing here, southern Alaska and the Panhandle. And the jet stream upper level high here over the eastern Pacific, kind of bulging up, but really not poking way up. So we got pretty good flow coming over the top into the interior. Southwesterlies turning westerly here, pulling moisture in, and 9,000 feet. Got 25, 35 knot southwesterlies here with ridge a little farther east of this elevation, another one popping up out over the Aleutians, and a pretty good increase in the winds on the western side of this ridge. 3,000 feet, about the same pattern. Turbulence, a lot of marginal chop here over the northern interior. That pretty brisk westerly flow extends all the way down to Nunivak Island.
Happy New Year, stargazers! Confused? This week is the vernal equinox, which means spring has sprung. We call spring spring because leaves literally spring forth at this time of year, as opposed to fall when they literally fall. For thousands of years, this week would have seen us celebrating the start of a new year and vernal equinox. It makes sense. Spring means rebirth and fertility, new life, literally a new year. But then the Roman Empire decided to copy the Egyptian calendar. They added a number of days to celebrate Roman emperors and started a new year on the 1st of January. The English adopted this calendar in 1752. Think about that. When George Washington was a young British officer, he would celebrate New Year this week on the first day of spring. Cool, right? Anyway, Happy New Year, everyone. Get outside, enjoy the equal parts day and night while you keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and we have a special guest in the studio today. We welcome Amanda Terborg of the Aviation Weather Center. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amanda's flown in all the way from Kansas City, and for those of you that don't know, the Aviation Weather Center serves the lower 48 for aviators, just as the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit here in Anchorage serves all of Alaska. So I kind of wonder, what's the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City doing to help out Alaska, Amanda?
Yeah, you know, we do a lot of collaboration work with our sister station up here. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work, especially in the satellite meteorology.
Okay.
In particular, we have been looking at ways to better identify icing conditions in clouds, which is a big deal up here because, as I'm coming to find out, even though I'm not from here, you guys have a lot of pilots here.
You have a lot of pilots. In fact, when you say you can't get there from here, that's how you get there.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so with icing potential then, what's Kansas City working on?
Well, we are working on something that will help us, again, identify the icing in the clouds. You don't want ice on your aircraft.
No.
Not only does it add a whole bunch of extra weight to your airframe when it attaches to the wings and the nose cone, but it can also mess with your aerodynamics.
Right.
And in the most serious conditions, that can mess with it enough that you can actually crash.
It changes the shape of the wing, and that makes it sometimes impossible to fly, right?
It does, yeah. So we want to figure out a way to better forecast for that.
Makes sense.
Now this particular image is over Alaska. The colors here are a little goofy. It doesn't look like your run-of-the-mill satellite image.
Okay.
But the red is where you have liquid clouds and the blue is ice. But again, it really doesn't tell you a lot where you have icing conditions in that cloud. Because in those clouds there's little droplets and they're cold and they're actually below freezing, but they're still liquid. And that makes them sticky.
Okay.
So when an aircraft flies through there, those droplets are sticking to the aircraft and it can happen amazingly fast.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to find. And there is a product called the Aircraft Flight Icing Threat that does this. And it's basically looking at the temperature of the cloud, and it's also looking at the size of the droplets to identify a probability and intensity of those icing conditions.
Okay.
And if you flip to the next image, this is a case from Juneau, Alaska, where this probably wouldn't have been the best day to fly around Juneau.
Okay.
Now there was an area of moisture that pushed south from the southwest up along the coast that pushed in a stratus layer. And in the stratus layer there was a lot of those super cooled liquid drops or a lot of stickiness.
Okay.
And so the flight icing threat was able to, in the pinks and the reds there, was able to identify where that icing was. Now this is really cool. You know, it's really cool to be able to identify that. There is, you know, of course, caveats to every product. Much as we wish it would it would happen. Sun doesn't shine all the time, unless, I guess, if you live in northern Alaska during the summertime.
Right, right.
But we need that sun to be able to bounce off those clouds and to be able to see where those super cool drops are.
Okay, so it's a daytime only tool.
It
for
is, yeah.
forecasters. Okay.
Yeah, right now, of course, you know, we're in the era of advanced satellite technology, and there is a satellite that can actually use moonlight to see clouds.
Yes.
And so sometime in the future, we hope to be able to do that.
Okay.
Another thing that is a bit of a challenge is multiple layers of clouds. You know, you can only see so far through a thick cloud.
Okay.
And if it's thick enough, sometimes you can't see a layer of icing that's below there.
Right, right.
But even besides those caveats, this product has a lot of potential to help out Alaskan aviators here.
Well, it sounds like a really big deal, and something that forecasters at the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit could use probably on a daily basis, and especially in the middle of a really big storm.
Yeah, I would think so.
Do you have a really good success story in the lower 48 using this tool?
You know, it's a fairly new product, and so we're still evaluating it. But yeah, we have had a lot of cases where we have seen that it does tend to capture those icing conditions.
Okay, very good. Well, Amanda, thanks so much for sharing some of the very interesting satellite imagery and the tools that you're using there at the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City with us here in Alaska. People can probably find some of this information online, right?
Yeah, here is a website here. It's a page from NASA Langley, and they have this imagery as well as a bunch of other satellite imagery that you can take a look at.
Okay, great. And I'm sure our friends at the Alaska Aviation Weather Center and the unit will be using that in the coming months there with your training and your help there to learn more about that tool to help Alaska aviators any day of the year. That's wonderful stuff. So thanks again for joining us, Amanda, and we welcome you to view any of our Alaska weather facts on YouTube anytime at the address below, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, still fair ways, 50, 60 or so nautical miles north of St. Paul. And of course, southerly winds, southwest winds continues pushing northward, but it looks like on Saturday, it'll be that change, or Friday night and Saturday, winds will become northerly out here, colder temperatures. So now, of course, obviously, will push the ice, will stop moving north and start advancing southward. But that'll be to a lesser extent out here because it'll be a little bit more of a maybe west-southwest breeze coming over the top of the building ridge. Otherwise, coastal water forecast here, south coast of the Panhandle, northwest winds 20 knots, sea 6 feet, and west-northwest 15 to 20 on the north coast. Light southeast breeze there for Lynn Canal at 10 knots, but seas are slight, and variable winds at 10 knots with slight seas over the central southern inside waters. And then for Saturday, north to northwest winds here with north winds for Stevens Passage at 10 knots, Clarence Strait northwest at 10, and 20-knot winds there along the marine zones there for Prince of Wales Island on the outer coast, and then west-southwest 15 here for the central coast, north coast south 15, and same thing for Lynn Canal, south winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. For Prince William Sound, northwesterlies 15 tomorrow, maybe a few higher gusts, but nothing too bad. West 20 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 9-foot seas, and then west 25. Small craft advisories here for the western North Gulf Coast, west 25 also for small craft advisories Barren Islands, and Kamishak Bay, west 25. Southern Cook Inlet, southwest 25 knots, 5-foot seas, and southwest at 15 north of the Forelands. Moving on to Saturday, Prince William Sound swinging around to the east at 15 for the winds, and south 20 there around Middleton Island. Actually, all the North Gulf Coast, southerlies at 20 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas, small craft advisories, Barren Island, southwest 25. 30-knot winds now for Kamishak Bay with 8-foot seas, but Southern Cook Inlet coming down to 15 knots from the south, and variable winds at 10 for the northern Cook Inlet area. Bristol Bay tomorrow, light southeast winds at 15, 2-foot seas. Southeast 20 here for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula with seas up to 10 feet, south 20 on the Pacific side. And light west winds up towards Sitkinak and Kodiak Island, westerlies 15 to 20 knots, strongest in Shelikof Strait. Those pick up, southwest 30 knots there, all areas of Kodiak Island, marine zones, and westerlies at 30 knots on down to Castle Cape. And north to northwest winds here coming across the Alaska Peninsula, 25 to 30 knots, and pretty good increase in winds. Forecast for Bristol Bay, west 30 knots. And for the western Aleutians, not too bad here, west to Adak, west-southwest 15 to 20 knots. Adak specifically, average it out to west, 15 to 20 knots. And for the Fox Islands, south to southeast, 20 to 25 knots, with those seas running 8 to 11 feet. And then swinging around to north there, 15 to 20 knots for the eastern Aleutians, northeast here south of Udmak Island, east-northeast 15 to 20 for Adak and Atka, and then southeast winds increase from Kiska on out to Shimia to 30 knots, seas build to 12 feet. Southwest coast, southerlies 20 to 25 knots, small craft advisories for the Pribilof, southerlies 25, southwest 25 for small crafts for St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, southwest winds 30 knots, brisk wind advisories there, and those come down, turn westerly to about 20 knots, and northwest here along the Kuskokwim Delta coast at 25 knots, otherwise winds west-southwest 20 knots for the Pribilof, St. Matthew Island. And gale warnings out tomorrow for the central and western Arctic coast, and southwest at 30 for the east side, west 30 knot winds down to Cape Thompson and Cape Thompson to Wales, also brisk wind advisory west 25. Lighter winds in store for Saturday, Wales to Cape Thompson, 20 knots out of the west, 15 western Arctic coast, east side here a little breezier, but coming down from what you see tomorrow, west-southwest 15 to 20, and even lighter on the central coast. Blizzard winter storm warnings here, Bering Strait up into the northwest interior, south of the Brooks Range. Blizzard warning western Arctic coast, and there'll be one on the east side later. And winter weather advisory in the interior, snow and blowing snow. Could see another anywhere 3 to 5 inches of snow, maybe up to 8 inches there, southern slopes of the Brooks Range into tomorrow. And fair sunshine down to the south, Panhandle again. And for the next day, Saturday, high pressure really building into the eastern Bering Sea here. That's going to drive some colder air and snowier conditions into all the way down to south central Alaska, Kodiak Island, with a pretty good shot of snow in the central and eastern interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.